Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission, as always, is to take a whole stack of compelling sources, really cut through the noise, and just leave you with the essential knowledge.
And today, well, we're immersing ourselves in a career that somehow manages to connect some really, really different extremes of 20th century culture. It's quite a journey.
It really is. If you have any interest at all in, the definitive story of the New York punk scene,
Yeah.
that raw, visceral time with the Velvet Underground, Iggy Pop, the Ramones.
Then you definitely know the book Please Kill Me. And our subject today is Gillian McCain, the co-author who really helped shape that incredible oral history.
Exactly. But here's what makes this deep dive, I think, so fascinating. It's the sheer, maybe unexpected range of her work. Our sources show this major figure in punk history,
Right, a towering figure.
who is also simultaneously a Canadian academic, a really sophisticated prose poet, very much plugged into the New York School literary theory.
And on top of that.
And yeah, also a dedicated, rigorous curator of forgotten photographs, what the art world calls found art.
It's quite the spectrum, isn't it? From the noise of the mosh pit, you could say, straight to the quiet focus of the archive.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
And what's really fascinating here, and this is what we're going to track throughout her career, is this single core idea. Synthesis. It seems to run through everything.
Synthesis, how so?
Well, think about it. Whether she's pulling together hundreds of, often conflicting interviews for a history book, or isolating just a few stray lines for a poem.
Or even saving an old snapshot from a flea market.
Exactly. She's always giving weight, giving value to these discarded fragments, things others might overlook. So our mission today is really to explore how she became this, architect of counterculture history.
And how that unique way of seeing things led her to champion this vernacular overlooked art.
Right. And the benefit for you listening in is you get this really complete intellectual toolkit by the end.
Yeah, we're covering a lot, the foundations of the NYC literary scene, the origins of modern oral history as a form.
The specifics of post-beat experimental poetry, which is its own fascinating world.
In the surprisingly deep world of collecting these forgotten images, you'll definitely walk away with a richer sense of what it means to be an archivist of the overlooked, I think.
Definitely. So let's dive in. We should probably start with the groundwork, right? Her academic and literary foundations, because they may be more traditional than you'd expect, given where she ended up.
Absolutely. So Gillian McCain, her roots are actually in Canada, Bath, New Brunswick specifically, which, feels a long way from the Bowery in New York City.
A very long way.
Her initial schooling gave her a really solid base. She got a Bachelor of Arts in Literature from the University of King's College in Halifax, Nova Scotia.
And that strong base, it seems, quickly propelled her south. She made that really key move to New York City in 1987.
Right. And you have to imagine New York at that time. What a magnet it was for writers, for artists looking for that downtown energy.
Absolutely. And by 1990, she'd already secured a Master of Arts in Literature from NYU. So you see this mix, right? Canadian discipline, maybe, and then this New York academic rigor. That's her starting point, intellectually.
But, okay, something really important happens right in the middle of that MA work. In the summer of '88, she attends a study program at the Naropa Institute in Boulder, Colorado.
Ah, Naropa.
Yeah.
Yes. For anyone who doesn't know, Naropa is hugely significant in American letters. Founded by Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche, a Tibetan Buddhist teacher, but also poets Allen Ginsberg and Anne Waldman.
The beat connection.
Exactly. That's famous for its association with the beats, with developing American avant-garde poetry, often really focused on, spontaneous writing, non-traditional methods.
So this exposure seems critical. It shows she's absorbing classical literary theory at NYU, but at the same time, she's embracing this very different, experimental, maybe more lived experience kind of poetry at Naropa.
It really sets the stage, I think, for her whole career, bridging that gap between maybe the highbrow and the lowbrow. She understood structure, absolutely, but she also clearly understood the power of the unfiltered, immediate voice.
And that understanding seems to have led her straight to, what really was the nerve center for experimental writing in New York at the time, the Poetry Project at St. Mark's Church in the Bowery.
Right. An amazing institution.
Right.
Located inside an active Episcopal church, which is interesting in itself. But yeah, it was the absolute nexus of the literary underground. And straight after graduating, she jumps right in and basically starts shaping the conversation there for the next decade.
You can see it in the roles she held. The timeline shows real commitment, not just showing up. She was program coordinator from '91 to '94.
And being program coordinator there, I mean, that wasn't just booking readings in that downtown scene.
Hmm.
That meant managing some pretty volatile personalities, probably juggling grants, keeping the whole, sometimes chaotic thing running.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And then she shifts, becoming editor of the Poetry Project newsletter from 94 to 95.
See that shift from managing people and events to managing and shaping the narrative, the actual published record of the place.
And on top of that, she also edited 4 issues of the literary magazine Milk, which was pretty influential at the time.
So she's not just a writer observing, she's mastering the craft of literary curation, of editing, right there in the thick of it, in real time.
If we look back at her legacy from that period, though, the big one has to be founding the Friday Night series in 1991.
Ah, yes, the Friday Night series. What was the specific, the vibe of that series? Because it sounds like it was pretty broad.
It was intentionally expensive, yeah. Hosted over 400 artists in just 4 years, and it cut across every boundary you can think of. Poetry, fiction, nonfiction, themed readings, tributes, lectures, performance art, even music.
400 artists in 4 years. Just think about the curatorial skill needed for that. To program that many diverse people and keep it coherent, keep it relevant. Especially in that notoriously competitive, opinionated downtown scene.
It really takes serious vision. It became this weekly institution that kind of normalized mixing disciplines, poetry right alongside performance art, fiction next to music.
And the fact that it's still going today, that really says something. It's a testament to how important it was, how solid its foundation was in the NYC literary infrastructure.
Definitely. And that ability, to manage all those voices, those different art forms, to synthesize that chaos into a program people actually wanted to come back to week after week.
That's the exact skill set, isn't it? The transferable skill she'd immediately apply to her big nonfiction projects later. That period at St. Mark's was her training ground for large-scale synthesis.
And we also see a clear pivot point here. She commits to writing full-time starting in 1995.
Right. It was also clearly a deeply personal space for her, too, not just professional.
Also.
Well, she met her future husband, the writer, James Jim Marshall, right there at the Poetry Project. They got married in 2002.
Ah, okay. So it really proves the place was more than just, a line on her resume. It was really the crucible for her creative life and her personal life, too.
Exactly. And that pivot to full-time writing in 95, armed with all those editorial skills, those organizational chops honed at St. Mark's, well, that led her straight to the project that would pretty much define her public image for decades.
Okay, yeah. Let's get into it. The book that, for so many people, is Gillian McCain, Please Kill Me. The Uncensored Oral History of Punk. Grove Press, 1996. Co-written with Legs McNeil.
This book was, well, it was a landmark. Before this, most rock history, especially the counterculture stuff,
Yeah.
it was often told, through journalists writing analytical narratives or maybe kind of sanitized biographies.
Right, someone telling you about the scene.
Exactly. Please kill me.
Yeah.
Just codified a totally different approach, the uncensored oral history. The book is structured almost entirely as dialogue. It's just chunks taken from hundreds of interviews, letting the messy, often contradictory voices of the people who were actually there speak for themselves.
And the subject matter. I mean, it's the absolute core of that American counterculture explosion. It covers such a crucial period, starting with the formative influence of the Velvet Underground.
That primal force.
Yeah, and then charting the rise and often the fall of icons through the 70s. Iggy Pop, the New York Dolls, the Ramones. It's volatile, complicated history, but it's presented as just raw, unvarnished testimony.
And the impact was, well, it was immediate, explosive, really. It wasn't just a hit book. It very quickly became a cult classic, and it basically inspired a whole new genre of book.
The musical oral history.
Right. Suddenly, history, especially music history, could be told as this kind of collective autobiography. You didn't need a narrator stepping in to mediate the experience for you. It validated the voices from the fringes, elevated their stories to actual historical record.
The praise was pretty definitive, too. Right away, it was named a top 10 book of the year by both Time Out and the Daily News.
And look at the language they used. Time Out New York said it ranks up there with the great rock and roll books of all time. That's not faint praise for just a niche music book. That's elevating the oral history of punk to the level of classic cultural literature.
And its reach was clearly global. It's been translated and published in tons of countries. Brazil, China, France, Germany, Japan, Russia, Italy, so many others.
Plus, excerpts ran in Vanity Fair when it came out. That signals that even the mainstream establishment recognized this history as essential. It really became the definitive synthesized account of what was, let's face it, a pretty fragmented scene.
And the energy of it, the raw energy, it apparently translated right off the page. In 2011, a French director, Mathieu Bauer, took the whole text and adapted it into a stage show, a punk musical.
Wow, a musical based on the oral history.
Yeah, which was then toured by the Nouveau Theatre Montreuil. It just speaks to the, I guess, the inherent theatricality and the enduring raw power that she and McNeil captured in collecting all those interviews.
Now, here's where we really see McCain's core philosophy, that idea of synthesis, demonstrated again, but with a massive thematic shift. Her next major collaboration with Legs McNeil in 2014 was Dear Nobody, the true diary of Mary Rose.
Right. This one maintains that commitment to the uncensored voice, that raw truth, but it pivots completely. Away from famous rock stars to someone completely anonymous and tragically so.
It seems like a huge leap, doesn't it? From celebrated, documented rock royalty to an unknown teenager's private struggles. Was that seen as a gamble? Commercially, critically, was there any pushback about, potentially exploiting a painful personal story?
That's a really important question. And from what our sources suggest, the reception was largely positive. And I think it's because the editorial philosophy stayed consistent.
Okay, how so?
Just like Please Kill Me compiled all those different, sometimes conflicting accounts from punk rockers to try and find the truth of the scene. Dear Dendy. Nobody compiles and edits the actual journal entries of one specific person. A 17-year-old Pennsylvania teenager named Mary Rose.
Detailing her struggles with addiction, alcoholism, and also cystic fibrosis, right?
Exactly. So the goal is the same, in a way. Present an unmediated, raw truth. Let the voice speak for itself.
So the common thread isn't fame, it's documenting these marginalized voices kind of fighting against the void, whether they're doing it with electric guitars or, a pen and a diary.
I think that's it precisely. Publishers Weekly called it a rare, no-holds-barred documentation of an American teenager's life written for no audience but herself.
Written for no audience but herself. That phrase really elevates it, doesn't it? It makes it the ultimate found historical document, something never intended for public eyes, but revealing this searing truth about, contemporary American life for some people.
It was also specifically praised, and this is interesting, as being the true version of that famous 1971 novel, Go Ask Alice.
Ah, right, which was presented as a real diary, but later revealed to be fiction.
Exactly. So Dear Nobody, in a sense, gave an authentic voice to a type of tragedy that had previously been fictionalized. It restored that commitment to reality, to the actual found document.
And the way people talked about the book seems to confirm its cultural weight. The diarist, Mary Rose, was famously described on WNYC-FM, I think it was during an interview with McCain and Mary Rose's mother back in 2014, as the Jane Austen of juvenile delinquents.
Wow. The Jane Austen of juvenile delinquents. That's quite a phrase.
It really is. It elevates this raw, painful, private testimony. It recognizes that the emotional depth, the observational detail found in these private fragments is profound enough to stand alongside great literature.
Okay, so we have her curating hundreds of public voices into a historical narrative, Please Kill Me, then curating one private voice into this powerful literary document, Dear Nobody. Now we need to pivot again, because at the same time, she's focusing on an even smaller unit of language, the poetic line in her own poetry.
Right. It's amazing, isn't it? While managing these huge nonfiction projects, she's also rigorously developing her own poetic voice. She started out apparently interested in free verse, pretty standard.
And then?
But then her studies with the poet Larry Fagan, who was a significant figure himself, influenced her to pivot towards the very specific structure of prose poetry.
We should probably pause there for a second just to clarify what prose poetry actually means for listeners who might not be familiar. It's not just, poetry printed like a paragraph.
Oh, absolutely not. No. Prose poetry is a really specific hybrid form. It rejects the traditional line breaks, the sort of rhythmic scaffolding of verse, but it tries to keep the density, the compression, the heightened imagery of poetry.
So it looks like prose on the page.
Right. But it feels like poetry when you read it. Mm-hmm. It aims to blend that maybe musical quality of poetry with the visual flow of prose. Often it's quite fragmented, maybe diaristic, focused on intense moments rather than, big narrative arcs.
Okay. So her first book of poetry in this style, Tilt, comes out in 1996, which is the exact same year that Please Kill Me drops.
Incredible bandwidth, right. Managing two massive, structurally demanding projects at the exact same time. One collecting external voices, the other crafting her own.
And Tilt, you said, is deeply connected to the New York School of Poetry aesthetic.
Very much so, yeah. To really get the analysis of her work, we need to quickly touch on what defined that movement. The figures like Frank O'Hara, John Ashbery.
Okay, so what are the key characteristics of the New York School?
Well, broadly speaking, it's known for its urbanity, its kind of anti-academic stance sometimes, and especially its focus on the immediate, often mundane details of daily life.
Like diary entries, almost.
Sort of, yeah. Diaristic observations, spontaneous images popping up, a rejection of the big, formal themes that maybe earlier poetic schools liked. And McCain's work fits right in. Tilt is described as reflecting the day-to-day chaos and intensity of New York life.
And noted for its chatty, detached style.
Exactly, that immediate observational style. It perfectly mirrors the kind of fragmented snapshot quality we see later in her visual art curation.
And here's where it gets really interesting conceptually, I think. Because the critical praise for Tilt, it almost creates this bridge linking her poetry to her later work with found photos.
How so?
Well, the poet John Ashbery himself, one of the giants of the New York School, he gave this amazing quote about Tilt. He said, McCain's poems are like urgent telegrams from the next door, or oddly but brilliantly cropped snapshots of a life that is going by.
Brilliantly cropped snapshots. Let's just hold on to that phrase for a second, because that feels like the conceptual key, doesn't it?
It really was.
Ashbery saw right back then that the way she presented these language fragments, isolated, framed moments, it was basically a form of visual curation. The meaning was in the editing and the framing, just like a curator deciding which photo to hang on a wall.
The small piece, the isolated fragment, whether it's a line of text or a moment caught on film, it contains the whole story.
Exactly. And the praise for this style was high. Harry Matthews, another respected author and poet, called Tilt, a brilliant collection of prose poems.
She followed that up with a second collection, Religion, in 1999.
Right. And the poet Mark Wallace, reviewing it in the Poetry Project newsletter, he really nailed her technique, I think.
Yeah.
Especially highlighting that critical distance she maintains.
What did he say?
He noted her work has that characteristic, I did this, then I did that New York School immediacy, that fast observational, present tense kind of flow. But, he says, she undermines it with ironic distance that collapses any naive faith in the immediate as a source of value.
That ironic distance, that feels key to her being such a good editor and archivist too, doesn't it? Whether she's editing hundreds of interviews for Please Kill Me or compiling her own observations in a poem, she pulls back slightly.
Right. She lets the fragment speak for itself. She doesn't over-explain or over-sentimentalize the material. It's kind of the opposite of self-indulgence, in a way.
And her actual process for writing poetry, it reinforces this whole idea of finding and curating fragments. She famously calls writing poetry treasure hunting.
Treasure hunting, I like that.
Yeah, her method involves actively grabbing lines from outside sources, like conversations she overhears on the street, random lines pulled out of books, magazines, newspapers.
So she's literally collecting the discarded language of the world around her, giving these verbal cast-offs new value, new context within her poems.
Exactly. She's treating language itself like it's a found object, which is fascinating because it means her poetry isn't solely about internal emotional expression. It's much more about external observation and assembly, putting things together.
Precisely. And the Encyclopedia of the New York School Poets actually synthesized the bigger meaning of this method really well. It said her prose manages to be both playful and deadly serious in its criticism of its form.
Okay, criticism of form.
The forms of contemporary society and the forms of opposition to society. So she's using this prose poem structure, this highly fragmented, found object way of writing, to implicitly critique the more organized, formal structures of society itself. It's quite sophisticated.
And this focus on shared voice, on fragmented experience, it carries on into her later work too, right? Like that collaboration Descent of the Dolls, Part 1 in 2017, which she wrote with Jeffrey Conway and David Trinidad.
Right. The very fact that it's collaborative reinforces that idea that the strongest voice, for her perhaps, is often a synthesized one, a collective one, not just a single authorial voice.
Okay, so we've tracked her journey from coordinating the New York scene to being this major punk historian synthesizing hundreds of voices to being a prose poet collecting found language. Now we shift to the third major part of her work, which is maybe the most visual, the most tangible. Her collection and curation of physical fragments, found photography.
Yes, and this is where all those conceptual threads we've been pulling really come together visually. She specializes in found photographs.
Let's just define that concept clearly. Found photographs are basically vernacular images, everyday pictures that have been, well, forgotten, discarded, orphaned, lost, stolen, maybe bought at flea markets or estate sales.
There are snapshots that were once incredibly meaningful to a specific person or family, right? But now they're just artifacts floating free of their original context.
It really is the visual equivalent of her grabbing an overheard line for a poem, isn't it? Or
Uh,
using a raw anecdote in the punk history. These are the spontaneous, unmediated expressions of everyday life, usually without any high art pretensions.
exactly. They capture real moments, awfully accidentally beautiful or maybe just strange, in a way that maybe a professional photographer aiming for perfection might miss.
And her dedication to these orphaned images led to a major exhibition and a book, both called HLP Me back in 2010. She co-curated this show, selecting photos from her own collection with the artist Megan Kump.
When it was exhibited at the Gallery of the Camera Club of New York. Her collection itself is incredibly broad in terms of format, which really shows her archival passion. It includes things like early tintypes.
Wow, really early stuff.
Yeah, and formal cabinet cards from the 19th century, right up through instant Polaroids and more modern snapshots. She's not just collecting pictures, she's collecting the physical history of everyday photography itself, making sure these forgotten moments get preserved.
And this artistic effort got validated pretty quickly. Vince Aletti, who's a very respected photography critic for The New Yorker, he reviewed the show and called it exhilarating.
Exhilarating. That's strong praise. It really validates the idea that these anonymous, discarded, often accidental images, they can be elevated to high artistic merit, but it takes that thoughtful, curatorial eye, like McCain's.
Aletti's specific comments are really telling too, because they highlight the kind of bizarre reality that vernacular photos often capture. He noted that images of rifles, costumes, and injuries crop up repeatedly.
Rifles, costumes, and injuries. That's the uncensored life again, isn't it? The inherent weirdness of everyday American life caught outside of the usual posed family portraits.
Right. And Aletti concluded that there was no real theme, only plenty of diverting quirkiness and inspiration.
And that idea that the randomness is the theme that feels essential to her whole project. It forces you, the viewer, to kind of construct your own meaning, your own narrative, from the fragments she provides.
Just like reading Please Kill Me, where you have to synthesize the history from all those conflicting voices, it becomes a shared act of creation between the curator and the audience.
Exactly. And the international appeal of her collection was highlighted too. It was featured in the December 2010 issue of the big French magazine, Photo. So the appeal of these universal yet totally anonymous moments clearly crosses borders.
Also in 2010, she published another collaboration focused on found images, but this one added a really interesting digital, almost collective element. 50 photos found by Fang, with text by the Hound.
Ah, yes. This project is great because it merges her literary side, her curatorial side, and her personal life so beautifully.
Oh,
Fang is the nickname, the sobriquet, for McCain herself, the finder, the collector.
and the Hound.
That's her husband, James Marshall. He provided the text descriptions for the photos.
Okay, so the structure here sounds pretty complex, very interactive, especially for 2010, reflecting how media was changing. It's her found photos, paired with descriptions by Marshall.
And crucially, also paired with commentary from readers of his popular music website.
Yeah.
Because the photos were initially posted online there.
Ah, so it's not just found art, it's collectively interpreted art by this anonymous digital community. That really is the ultimate exercise in synthesizing fragmented visuals and fragmented digital voices.
Totally. And to get a feel for the sheer compelling strangeness of the content, there's a great quote from Joe Bonomo's blog, No Such Thing as Was.
What did he say?
He described the book as this incredible collage of life. He wrote, "In 50 photos found, there's young love, old love, doubtful love, drinking, hamming, military life, beach bums, and barflies.
Okay, a real slice of life.
Nudie posters on the wall, maybe pimps, parties, teenagers, bedrooms, and basements. A generous slice of living enacted by mysterious strangers caught in perpetuity doing strange things, or things so ordinary that they become strange."
Things so ordinary that they become strange. That line just perfectly encapsulates the whole aesthetic, doesn't it? The goal of looking at vernacular art.
It really does. It's about pulling significance out of the mundane, capturing those fleeting moments that, as Bonomo says, blink and you'd miss it. It's the visual equivalent of her collecting that overheard conversation for a poem. It's really an exercise in deep attention.
And her collection has kept drawing attention from both literary and art worlds, right?
Yeah.
Sort of cementing her role as a key archivist of this kind of material.
Yeah, it was featured in Lid magazine in 2012 in a section called Sleepwalking, photographs in the collection of Gillian McCain, and images were also featured in the Columbia Poetry Review in 2014. Her curation, her act of selecting and presenting these images, is consistently recognized as being almost a form of literature itself.
So, okay, if we step back now and look at the whole arc of this incredible career, what's the big unifying idea? We started with, punk rock chaos and academic rigor, and we ended up looking at anonymous family photos and overheard snippets of dialogue.
I think the unity is absolutely in the methodology. This whole deep dive into Gillian McCain's work, it reveals this powerful, lifelong practice of collection, editing, and synthesis. And maybe most importantly, giving enduring value to things that other people might have deemed abandoned or maybe even worthless.
Right. She collected hundreds of competing stories for Please Kill Me. She collected these disparate bits of language for her poems, and she collected these visual fragments, these orphaned photos for her exhibitions.
She consistently acts as this archivist of the overlooked. She gives weight and significance to fragments, to previously discarded voices or artifacts, whether that's a punk rocker's crude anecdote about some filthy hotel,
Or a struggling teenager's incredibly painful diary entry about addiction.
or just a blurry, forgotten Polaroid snapshot found at a flea market. She sees the value in all of it.
So the big takeaway here for you, the listener, is maybe that her work teaches us something important. That the greatest insights, whether you're trying to write history or poetry or even just understand art, they're often found not in the big, grand narratives.
But in the seemingly random stuff, the overlooked things, the things that, like Bonomo said, blink and you'd miss them, it takes a certain kind of editorial eye, I think, to be able to spot the truth hidden in the wreckage, so to speak.
And that leads us perfectly into our final provocative thought for you to chew on. Given her deep commitment to capturing the raw, the uncensored voice, that fragmented, maybe accidental truth of a moment, we have to think about how her method applies now.
Right. We live in an age of just unprecedented digital debris, don't we? Billions of forgotten social media posts, blurry phone pics, abandoned digital diaries.
So what new forms of found art are being created and maybe instantly discarded every single day in the digital realm? And how will future curators, future archivists, applying McCain's kind of ethos of synthesis and preservation, how will they ever manage to sift through that absolutely endless stream of digital fragments to find the pieces that have enduring power and meaning?
That's a huge question. And maybe answering that and perhaps seeking out your own overlooked fragments in the world around you is your task until the next deep dive.
Thanks for joining us as we explored the incredible, really multifaceted career of Gillian McCain.